The music was still playing. Low violins hummed through the marble walls of the cathedral, rising and falling like breath caught in someone's throat. Guests, dressed in gold and ivory, whispered gently, assuming the delay was just the usual bridal thing, maybe a broken heel, maybe a last-minute makeup fix. But what none of them knew was that the bride was no longer in the bridal suite. She was standing in the hallway, motionless, her veil still pinned perfectly to the back of her head, her hands still holding the bouquet of lilies, but her eyes fixed, unmoving, locked on the door in front of her. She had opened it only once, and what she saw inside tore something wide open. Inside that room, less than 30 feet from the altar where they were supposed to start a new life, her fiancé, David, was on his knees, hands buried in the skin of a woman whose voice Elena recognized before she even saw her face. Her cousin, her maid of honor, and his ex-wife. Neither of them looked up. They didn't hear the door open. They didn't see Elena standing there, watching, breathing, but barely. She didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't drop the flowers. She simply turned and walked away. But this was only half the story, because 27 minutes later, Elena returned, still wearing her veil, still silent, but no longer carrying flowers. In her left hand, a box. In her right, the truth. And what she did next, at that wedding, in front of every guest, every camera, and every lie ever told to her face, would end 3 legacies in one afternoon. But no one knew that yet. To them, the wedding was just running a little late. Before we continue, if your chest felt tight in that last moment, if even a sliver of you wondered what you'd do in her shoes, pause, tap the screen, subscribe, because once we go deeper into this story, it doesn't let go. And tell us, where are you watching this from? Because this kind of silence, it has a habit of hiding in places just like yours. Her name was Elena Monroe. To the world, she was just another name on the billionaire registry. Old money, old blood, raised in a stone house by the ocean that had no address, only a gate and a name carved into iron, Marrow. People assumed things about girls like her, spoiled, distant, but Elena was none of those things. She was polite to everyone. She sent handwritten thank you notes. She volunteered at a school 3 towns over because her family wouldn't let her be seen at the one near their estate. Her father once said, "You can't teach steel to melt." And Elena? She didn't argue. She just kept quiet and kept watching. That's what she was best at. Watching, remembering. Every birthday, every betrayal, every fake smile across a dinner table. Elena kept them, not out of bitterness, but precision. Because when you grow up surrounded by people who smile with their teeth but never with their eyes, you learn quickly. Truth is a thing that wears disguises. And David Carrington was the most carefully disguised man she'd ever met. They met at a charity auction in London. He bid on a glass sculpture. She bid on the same one. He let her win. That night he said, "I only fight for things I can't live without." By month 3, he was having dinner with her father. By month 5, he was on her family's yacht. By the end of the year, he was proposing on a mountaintop, with no cameras, no crowd, just them, and a ring once worn by her mother. He never asked about her fortune, never flinched at the security guards. He said he loved her quiet, loved how she didn't care about followers or press. He told her she was unlike anyone he'd ever met. But even then, there were moments, small ones, moments when his phone would buzz and he'd step outside, when she'd ask about his ex-wife and he'd smile, too easily, when Celeste, her cousin, began coming around more often. Elena noticed. She always noticed. But she'd grown up around liars. She knew the difference between a story and a strategy. What she didn't know yet was that their entire relationship, from the first auction bid to the final wedding rehearsal, was never about love. It was a chessboard, and she was the final piece they needed. and while everyone else saw a young bride with a fairy tale ahead of her, Elena was quietly collecting evidence, because some people react to betrayal with tears, some with rage, but Elena, she responds with documentation, and the wedding was her deadline. The morning of the wedding, the sky looked like porcelain, still, pale, unbothered. Elena woke before the staff. She sat by the open balcony, untouched makeup, white robe, hands pressed together like a statue in a chapel. There was no fear in her face, no nerves. She had already buried those. For the outside world, it was a spectacle. A Monroe wedding hadn't happened in 15 years, 3 security convoys, imported orchids, a guest list that included oil families, retired royals, and a man no one recognized but everyone knew not to ask about. The cathedral had been closed to the public for 4 days, every pew polished, every candle tested. The choir rehearsed a 300-year-old hymn known to make elderly guests weep. David wasn't staying with her the night before. Tradition, they said. Respect, he insisted. So he stayed at the guest estate across the vineyard. That morning he sent her a message. "I can't wait to see you walk toward me. You'll look like something I never deserved." She didn't respond, just stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. By 1:47 p.m., the final dress adjustments were complete. Her makeup artist cried when she saw the veil placed. Elena didn't. Guests were seated by 2:10. The bell tower rang 3 slow times. The music started, but Elena didn't appear, not at first. The officiant was informed there'd be a 10-minute delay. Routine, they said. The truth? At 2:12, Elena realized her locket was missing, the one her mother had worn the day before she died, the one she never allowed anyone else to touch. She asked 2 staff members if they'd seen it. One pointed, saying it might have fallen into David's room during the morning handoff. So Elena walked, alone, through the west corridor, past the curtain that divided the bridal path from the guest wing. When she reached the door, she didn't knock. She didn't need to. It was slightly open, and through that narrow crack, she saw everything. David, on his knees, Celeste behind him, her hands in his hair, her voice low and breathless. Elena didn't gasp. She didn't flinch. She simply opened the door a little wider, and they still didn't see her. Celeste's shoes were on the floor. The necklace Elena had been searching for was around Celeste's neck. That was when Elena closed the door again. She turned, walked back toward the bridal room, took off her heels, washed her hands, and then she opened the drawer her father once told her never to open until she was sure. Inside was a silver key. She took it, placed it in her purse, removed her gown, folded it carefully, put on something else, and waited. Because if they thought the betrayal was complete, they didn't know Elena Monroe at all. At 2:37 p.m., the cathedral doors opened. Everyone stood. The organ shifted into the opening measure of the entrance hymn. Phones tilted, chatter hushed, eyes turned to the aisle. And there she was, Elena Monroe. But something was off. She wasn't wearing her gown, not the one tailored in Paris, not the one she was last seen in. Instead, she wore a sleek, full-length black dress. No embroidery, no shine, just silk and silence. Her hair was still pinned, her veil still in place. But beneath it, no smile, no softness. She held no bouquet, no father on her arm, no music in her steps. Just one hand on her side, and one hand holding a small wooden box. At first, the guests thought it might be a second ceremony, a private ritual, a symbolic moment. But then they saw her eyes, and no one spoke again. She walked slowly, too slowly. Each step sounded louder than the music. By the time she reached the altar, David was already standing there, tense, pale, his smile twitching at the edges. Celeste was off to the left, still in her bridesmaid's dress, still trying to fix her lipstick, and Elena said nothing. She placed the box on the altar, turned to the officiant, nodded. He hesitated. She nodded again. He stepped back. Elena opened the box. Inside, a silver flash drive. She looked at the sound technician, pointed once. He plugged it in. What followed was silence, at first, then static, then a video clip, grainy, black and white, time-stamped, that same day, just 1 hour earlier. There was no mistaking it. David, Celeste, the room, the act. The video played for exactly 21 seconds, no more. Then it cut to black, no music, no gasp, just silence so deep you could hear the candles flickering. David stepped forward, but Elena raised one hand, not in anger, just finality. He stopped. Celeste didn't move. Elena turned, faced the guests, scanned the room, and for the first time all day, she spoke, but not to them, to the air, to herself. This is not a mistake. It's an answer. Then she stepped down from the altar, walked down the aisle, not hurried, not ashamed. She passed the guests like a queen leaving her own coronation early because she knew the crown was worthless. Outside, the sun was still shining, but inside, nothing was the same. Outside the cathedral, the world continued as usual. Waves moved quietly along the coast. The press waited near the gates, bored. Doves flapped in the towers, unaware that the ceremony they'd been trained to celebrate had just become a funeral, not for lives, but for names. Inside, the video had stopped playing, but it was still echoing, not in sound, but in silence. David stood frozen at the altar, his tie suddenly too tight, his hands twitching against each other like he couldn't decide which version of himself to hold on to. Celeste, 2 steps behind him, refused to make eye contact with anyone. The bridesmaids didn't move. The groomsmen shifted uneasily, looking at the ground like boys waiting for punishment. And the guests watched, some with mouths open, some pretending to cough, some raising their phones but then quickly lowering them again, unsure if this was still part of the script. Elena didn't look back. She didn't need to. Her absence was louder than the organ. She didn't yell, didn't accuse, didn't explain. She let the evidence speak, because betrayal, when recorded, doesn't need commentary. At the end of the aisle, she paused, spoke briefly with one of the security staff. He nodded, left the room. Moments later, every door in the cathedral was locked, not to trap anyone, but to make a point. No one leaves until the truth is done being heard. 2 staff members entered through the side. They held a silver briefcase, placed it beside the projector, opened it. Inside, printed transcripts, photocopies of messages, email threads, flight records, wire transfers, names, dates, amounts, everything. Because what Elena uncovered in the weeks before this wedding wasn't just an affair. It was a plot. A quiet alliance between 2 people who hated each other just slightly less than they hated her. David needed a new inheritance. Celeste wanted her last name back in the headlines. Together they built a trap, and Elena was the bait they were counting on to walk blind. Instead, she turned their trap into a stage, and their lies into a press release. By 3:12 p.m. the family lawyer was in the room, documents in hand, pre-signed, pre-validated. The Monroe estate formally revoked all pending marital asset agreements. David Carrington was removed from all clauses, trusts, and emergency succession mentions. Celeste was issued a public restraining notice, and the Monroe name would remain under Elena, alone. The guests were offered refreshments, a second, optional lunch, or transport back to their hotels. The wedding was canceled, but the event? Unforgettable. By the next morning, the tabloids had found the footage. It was never officially released, but it didn't matter. People with enough money to bury truth always forget. Someone's always watching, and someone always leaks. Headlines spun like sirens. Billionaire bride walks out mid-wedding, leaks groom's affair on cathedral screen. The fall of Carrington. One afternoon, 2 scandals, 40 $40 lost. From maid of honor to mistress, the cousin who tried to take it all. David Carrington lost his board seat before lunch. By dinner, his accounts had been flagged for investigation. 3 weeks later, 2 minor shareholders in his company filed suit for fiduciary misconduct. 1 month after that, he quietly left the country. Destination unknown. Celeste tried to fight back. She filed a statement with her lawyer, claimed the footage was doctored, said she was manipulated, said it was a setup. But Elena had already anticipated it. At a private hearing held just 5 days after the wedding, Celeste was shown a copy of her own voice, a recorded call, 2 months prior, to David. She'd said, "We're going to take everything from her, piece by piece. Smile while we do it." Her lawyer never showed up again. That recording was never made public. Elena didn't need the world to hear it. She just needed the law to. And once it was heard, Celeste's options shrank. She was removed from 5 family trusts. Her social circle disappeared. Her brand endorsements were quietly terminated. She moved, changed her number, posted once on social media, a blank screen with the word rebuilding. No one liked it, no one commented, and Elena, she didn't gloat, didn't hold interviews, didn't post cryptic quotes or veiled insults online. She simply lived. She donated the entire cost of the wedding to a private fund for women navigating betrayal, public humiliation, or financial entrapment. She renamed the fund Sapphire One, the same name of the necklace she'd worn that day. No press release, no ribbon cutting, just quiet action. A few months later, someone asked her during a closed board meeting what she considered her proudest moment that year. She looked up briefly, smiled, and said, "Knowing when to leave." That was it. No revenge speech, no lingering grudge. Just a woman who saw every hand moving against her and simply chose not to play the game they expected. Because Elena Monroe didn't want to win. She wanted them to remember she never had to lose. Even after the dust settled, not everyone believed it happened the way it looked. Some say Elena had known for months, that she didn't discover the betrayal that day, that she'd orchestrated the timing. Down to the moment the choir hit its second note, down to the veil, down to the silence after the footage ended. A former Monroe family chef, who worked the rehearsal dinner, claimed Elena had stopped by the wine cellar the night before the ceremony, alone. She asked for an unlabeled bottle, red, 2003. When asked why, she only said, "It's the year the mask slipped." That vintage was the same one served at her mother's funeral, the same one her cousin once claimed she hated. Coincidence or cue? Another guest, a diplomat's wife, later shared she found a handwritten note folded into her place card. It read, "Some people leave the altar, others bury it." Elena never acknowledged writing them. No proof they existed, but 2 others said they found notes too, each different, each unsettling. What would you do if you weren't afraid of who's watching? Loyalty is louder when no one claps. Then there's the matter of the second flash drive. The one used at the wedding was silver, but a server later reported seeing a gold one in Elena's purse that morning. She said she remembered it because of the initials etched on the side, D.C. David Carrington. That flash drive was never mentioned in court, never seen again, but rumors suggest it didn't just contain footage. It had emails, screenshots, voice memos, not just between David and Celeste, but between David and another woman. Not a bridesmaid, not a lover. A name that was quietly linked to the Monroe Foundation's offshore accounts. Was it insurance? A final move Elena never had to use? No one knows. And Elena? She refuses to confirm or deny. In the one interview she gave, for a business magazine, she was asked if she still believed in love. She paused, tilted her head slightly. "I believe in silence," she said. "It tells the truth longer than people do." And that was the last she ever said about that day. No book deal, no exposé, no follow-up wedding. She vanished from public view for nearly a year, until one photo surfaced. taken in a quiet village off the Amalfi coast. Elena, sitting by a fountain, sketching, no ring, no guards, just her. And pinned to the edge of her sketchbook, a single pressed orchid, the kind that had once lined the aisle of a wedding that never happened. Where is Elena now? They say she moved to Italy, but not Rome, not Milan, too loud, too public. No, Elena chose Ravello, a cliffside town with no airport, where cell signal bends to the wind and tourists leave before sundown. There, she bought an old vineyard, run down, abandoned, vines tangled like broken promises. She rebuilt it by hand, no announcements, no ribbon cutting, just days of soil under fingernails and evenings sketching in silence. The locals called her La Signora Fantasma, the ghost woman, not because she was cold, but because she was never fully there. She spoke little, listened always, paid in cash, tipped in coins folded inside handwritten notes. Once a child dropped a bottle in front of her. She knelt down, picked up the glass, and said only this: "Things don't always shatter when you think they will. The real break comes later, when no one's watching." The boy didn't understand, but he never forgot. Neither did the villagers. Her home, if you can call it that, sits at the highest point of the hillside. No gate, no name on the bell, but inside. A single photograph remains in the main room, framed in dark wood, taken from behind. Elena, in her wedding gown, standing before the cathedral doors, before she walked in, before it all changed, frozen in the moment before the truth made its entrance. Some say she looks sad in it, others say relieved. And near the frame, a key, hung loosely on a nail, not labeled, but next to it, etched into the wall by hand. Some doors you walk through, some you lock behind you. And that's all anyone ever finds. No memoir, no farewell post, no second wedding, no return. Just quiet vineyards, a house on the cliff, and the name Elena Monroe whispered like myth. So what happened that day, in the bridal suite, in the chapel, in the vineyard, wasn't just about betrayal. It wasn't just about love gone wrong or a ceremony that collapsed mid-vow. It was about a woman, raised by silence, trained by loss, cornered by loyalty, and finally, freed by truth. She didn't burn his house, didn't slash his tires, didn't scream in the middle of the aisle or break the champagne glasses. She didn't have to, because the worst kind of revenge is peace, the kind that lives so fully, so loudly, it echoes through the regrets of those who lost you. And Daniel? Daniel never remarried, never hosted another gala, never spoke of Elena again, but every July 7th, he sends a single bouquet to a hillside in Ravello. No card, no message, just 12 white orchids, always wilted before they arrive. Before you go, if you've watched this far, you felt something. Maybe anger, maybe sadness, maybe a memory you don't talk about anymore. Either way, it found you. So ask yourself, why haven't you subscribed yet? If you think these stories are just stories, close this tab. Go ahead. But if something about this felt familiar, if you've ever loved someone who didn't look back, or wanted closure you never got, or found your strength too late, then don't scroll. Don't forget, hit subscribe. Right now. Because stories like this aren't entertainment. They're warnings, and sometimes reminders. And if you still won't subscribe, go to the comments. Write exactly why, and tell us where you're watching from. We read everyone, so do others, especially the ones who've lived through what Elena did, but never got the ending she did. And if you're thinking of skipping past this, just remember, not every betrayal ends in violence. Some end in vineyards, and that might be worse.